Welcome in, everyone, to another edition of the GSMC College Football Podcast, brought to you by the GSMC Sports Network. I'm your host, as always, Tommy Brzee. It is Monday, August 19th around here, and we have football this week, folks. It is about 4 days, 15 hours, and a couple of minutes till we have football on the field. Florida State and Georgia Tech facing off in Ireland this upcoming weekend, so we have a ton to get to today. We're going to start talking about Week 0 just a little bit, and then we'll get into some lingering questions around the top contenders. That's really what I want to get into in segment 1 here. We'll kind of break that down throughout the week and kind of just get into things that have popped up throughout fall camp, some other things that have just kind of formed throughout the offseason. We'll get into all of that today. Then we'll get into Will Howard. He was officially named the starting quarterback at Ohio State. Is he going to be able to deliver on the big-time expectations that they have? Because as we know, it's national title or bust for the Buckeyes this upcoming year. Then we'll get into who is going to be the odd team out in the SEC. That is a big-time question around this time of year, with about 8 or 9 teams expecting to win 9 or 10 games this year. That just can't happen. So we'll have to figure out who's that team or teams that will be on the outside looking in at the end of the day. Then we have fall camp intel, a huge injury over at Louisville and a couple over at Oregon that I want to update you on. And then we'll do a recruiting update at the very end, a huge commitment for Tennessee this last weekend, and a couple for Miami, a couple for LSU, and one going the opposite direction of Texas. So we'll break down everything you need to know at the end there. But before we jump in, I do want to remind you all we get tons of questions and comments throughout the show. And the best way for you all to get your question on the screen, we can have a fun back and forth here, is to use the Super Chat feature. We now have the Super Chat feature on the Sports Network page, so if you're on the podcast network, you might want to jump on over to the Sports Network YouTube, and you can use that little dollar icon at the bottom of the chat, and you can leave any question you like, any comment you like, and I would absolutely love it. You know, the best thing about what we do here is we can have kind of an interactive experience, so very much want to expand on that, and this is a great way to do that. If you cannot use the Super Chat feature, or you don't feel comfortable using it, you're more than welcome to go over to gsmcpodcast.net. That is also up and running, and you can use that for the same exact purpose and get the same result there. But either way is more than fine with me, and if you want to just drop questions in the chat, that's more than fine as well. Just want this to be a very interactive experience, that especially with the season coming around, definitely want you guys to have your say in what this show is. But let's get into week 1, and let's get into week 0. Let's get into segment 1 and talk about a little bit of week 0, because we are getting very close, folks. It is about as close as you can feel. It's getting to that point of the year where you can really feel it. You wake up every morning and you feel that it's one day closer. You feel like you're a little bit closer to that thing kicking off, toe meeting the leather, and we get things going. And usually, you know, that week 0 game is kind of iffy, right? You know, some people count down to week 1 because week 0 doesn't grab them quite as much. But that's when you get, you know, a Navy Notre Dame like we got last year. No disrespect to Navy, but at the end of the day, that was not the most riveting matchup in the world. Sam Hartman looked like a superhero coming out of it and was the Heisman favorite, but at the end of the day, it was not like this one this year, because not only do we get a conference matchup, not only do we get two teams that are going into this season with a good amount of expectations, but we get a very interesting battle. We get one team in Georgia Tech that returns almost everyone, returns so many different people, a couple of transfers on the defensive side of the ball, but overall, return the quarterback, return the top running back, return the top 3 or 4 receiving options on that team, while Florida State is replacing all of that. Now, they do have some big-time players coming back on defense with Peyton Patrick and Shaheem Brown and Azariah Thomas, but at the end of the day, it is definitely going to be a very interesting matchup, and one that could get a little bit closer than some are expecting, but we will break it down later on during the week. We'll break down all of the biggest points around this game because, man, I just cannot wait to break it down, that's for sure. But let's get into the top teams, and let's break down some lingering questions there, because there's still some big-time questions for the top 4 teams, as I've called them, the Big 4, as we head into this year. So let's go ahead and jump into this. Let's start with, does the UGA O-line have enough to slow down Phil Mafah in this running attack? Clemson's O-line necessarily wasn't the strongest thing in the world a year ago. It looks much improved this year. There's no doubt about that. They look like a team that is going to be ready to go, is going to be at least closer to what they have been in the past on the offensive line. So the question is, can Georgia combat that? Because Jordan Davis is not in that room. Jalen Carter is not in that room. So you don't have that guy that you can look at and say, that's one of the best defensive tackles in the country, bar none. There's none of those guys in that room. Now, that doesn't mean they're not successful, incredible guys in that room, where you have guys like Christian Miller, who is a very talented sophomore that, frankly, I think could end up being the best defensive tackle for Georgia throughout the entire year. On top of that, you got a couple of veterans, Nazir Stackhouse, Warren Brinson, that are going to be absolutely huge. You have Xavier McLeod, who I think is huge coming over from South Carolina. In fact, I think him and Christian Miller are likely the two most important players because of the athletic ability and because of the depth that they bring. I do think they're really, really important. And then you got Jordan Hall, you got Jamal Jarrett, a couple of younger guys that absolutely could help out in rotational pieces. But at the end of the day, it does look like a position that is not nearly where Georgia had it a couple of years ago. None of these guys are Jordan Davis. Now, Christian Miller could be a really, really good player in time, but this year he's not going to be Jordan Davis. He's not going to be Jalen Carter. So you're going to have to figure out other ways to kind of combat this, whether it's, making sure that all of the linebackers are perfect at run fits, which frankly, I think that's a huge plus in this scenario where you have CJ Allen, you have Smile Mondin, you have a lot of guys that know exactly where they need to be, and as long as they fit those holes, you'll at least be able to stifle runs. Now, the difference between a linebacker making the tackle and a defensive tackle making it is very different. It's, 0 yards or 3 to 4 yards a carry. So you can't just rely on the linebackers. They need the interior guys to do some work. But at the end of the day, I think they have the dudes, but plenty of guys need to come along, mainly Christian Miller and Xavier McLeod, to make this look like a unit that we've come accustomed to in Athens, Georgia. Moving over to Texas, do they have a solution for all the running back injuries? Because you look across this team, they're pretty healthy. All things considered, this has been a relatively healthy roster. They just had 2 injuries at the same exact position, so it looks a lot worse than it is. But at the end of the day, they do have to find an answer. CJ Baxter was not only the best red zone and in-between the tackle back that they had, he was by far the best pass blocker, and that is a huge thing. And frankly, I think it might have been the position that Christian Miller, the other guy that went down, was going to fill in that place, because he is another bigger back that is very rangy, very athletic. So I thought he would be the perfect guy to be that pass pro, deep third downs, 3rd and 12, and you need an extra guy blocking. I think he would have been that pick. He also went down with a season-ending injury. So they're down to 3 running backs that are on scholarship in that room, and it starts with Jaden Blue. Jaden Blue is going to have to take up a ton of different carries that normally would not be there for him. But I think he's more than capable to do that. Frankly, I had him as the number 1 running back on this team before CJ Baxter went down, but the margins were very thin on that of course. But I do think this is a guy that can make every single play that you need him to make. He's really, really good catching the ball out of the backfield. He's incredibly fast. You'll notice it pretty much right away. And he can run in between the tackles. It's not nearly the level of CJ Baxter in that respect, but definitely is someone that can lower a shoulder and make a really hard run. I was watching the Washington highlights yesterday, and he had a touchdown run where he just ran through someone, and it was it kind of showed you that he has that in him, but you're going to need a little bit more of that this upcoming year. Now, who's going to be the short yardage back? Who's going to be the pass blocking back? All of that is another question, and I think you look at, for red zone, I think you're looking at Jared Gibson. He's a freshman who's about 6 foot 220, a absolute bowling ball of a human, and definitely will be that short yardage red zone back if I had to imagine. And then I think Trey Wisner is a guy that can absolutely do the pass pro. He's a very athletic back, someone that is a little bit smaller than these other backs, but at the end of the day, if you can keep your feet moving, stay in front of that linebacker, you're going to be okay. So I do think Trey Wisner could fit into that role, but overall, the overarching thing that I've come back to is just put more on Quinn Ewers' shoulders. Pass the ball more, ask him to do more, because he's your third-year starter. He should be able to answer that bell. So that would be my answer right now, but definitely some lingering questions over there in Austin, Texas right now. Moving over to Ohio State, my biggest question really is, can this O-line take the step forward that they need? Because they're going to face some defensive lines that are going to give them trouble. Michigan, Penn State, Oregon all have really good defensive lines, and you have a group that is still being shuffled around just a little bit up in Columbus. And I think adding Seth McLaughlin from Alabama is a huge help. Now, I understand he had some snapping troubles, but figure that out. He was a fantastic blocker in run blocking and all of that type of thing. So that's not a worry for them. Definitely will be an improvement there. Donovan Jackson is going to be incredible, one of the best linemen in the entire country. So not worried about him one bit. The big time questions here are at left tackle. You do have someone that I think is very talented in JioSaavn, Josh Simmons. He came over from San Diego State in 2023. Didn't necessarily play the year that he wanted to, but at the end of the day, he was coming from San Diego State to Ohio State. So kind of giving him a little bit of leeway there, but it's going to be interesting to see if he can really hold down that left tackle position. I think he can, but definitely didn't necessarily hit the stride that you wanted to a year ago. Over on the other side, Josh Fryer is going to play a solid right tackle. You need him to take it up just a little bit more this year, I would assume. And it sounds like Tegra Shabula is going to be the guy at right guard. He is a beast. I actually do think he is someone that is going to develop into a very, very talented player and be one of those guys that you look up in a couple of years and he's kind of the linchpin of this offensive line. So I very much like this group comparative to last year. Now, there's still some things that need to come along. You know, Seth McLaughlin needs to hit the way they want to. Josh Fryer needs to play a little bit better football. Josh Simmons needs to take a little bit step forward as well. So as you get through the season, you face all these incredible defensive lines, especially the one at the end against Michigan. You're going to have to be on your P's and Q's that day. That is for sure. And we'll figure out if Ohio State has the dudes to do it. Then finally, Oregon, do they have a true weakness? Do they have a thing that we can point to and say that is something that is going to really hurt their season? Because you look at Georgia, you can find the interior defensive line that doesn't look too strong. If you look at Texas, you know, you can worry about that back end. You can worry about the interior defensive line losing those two players they did a year ago. When you look at Ohio State, you can worry about the quarterback and the O-line. When you look at Oregon, it's funny because it's not a team that's perfect by any means, but they are a team that feels like they have a lot of the boxes checked. And one of the big-time worries from last year was the pass defense by a wide margin. That was the biggest problem they had. They brought in Jabbar Muhammad. They brought in Brandon Johnson. They brought in Cam Alexander, and they brought in Kobe Savage, who, frankly, I think might be one of the most underrated transfer portal additions they got this entire cycle. That dude plays football just incredibly fast, incredibly instinctively, and is really, really good on that back end. And then the other thing is the pass rush that I was worried about from a year ago. This is more just about who's coming back and taking strides forward. You know, Jordan Burch coming back should take another step forward from last year. Mateo Uiagalelei, I think, is the most physically talented edge rusher that they have and likely will be a big-time player for them. And then Elijah Rushing is a freshman to watch there. So the top-line guys I love. I think they do need a little bit of depth there, but overall, it'll be interesting to watch. Interior defensive line, they need to bolster, of course. Jamari Caldwell and Derek Harmon do a good job of bolstering that, that's for sure. But at the end of the day, it'll be interesting to see how that develops. Overall, if you were to point a hole, if you were to poke something that is going to be an issue for them this year, I would say it's defensive depth. They need guys in the 2-3 deep that can play pretty much at the drop of a hat. And right now, with some injuries and some different things going on, it feels like they have that top line fully figured out, and frankly, they do have depth. It's not like they don't have anyone behind these guys, but they're going to need a little bit more. I can feel pretty confident about that. So if you were to poke a hole in this Oregon team that seems pretty hard to poke a hole in, I think that would be the place you do it, and maybe that's where a lot of these games are decided this upcoming year. But let's take our first break here, and when we come back, we're going to talk about Will Howard, dig into Ohio State just a little bit more. He was named the starting quarterback, so now the real pressure starts, and you got to meet all the expectations of Ohio State fans, and as we remember, they are quite lofty from a year ago, but we'll break it down right after this, so stick with us.
I feel like I'm losing my mind. Is everybody in the world blind? Please, Lord, give me a sign, a sign. I feel like I'm losing my mind. Is everybody in the world blind? Please, Lord, give me a sign, a sign.
I wanna be the greatest. Everybody on the fake shit. I look around and feel like everybody is the fakest. I make this every day and I'm impatient. Hoping one day I blow up from the basement. Statement, the top is so vacant. I don't hear shit that I think is amazing. Waiting for my day when I'm playing. Sold out shows for 1,000 faces. Hey, give me that crown. Get in my way and to be put down. It ain't your place, all this my town. If I want that shit, then I'll get it right now. I'm losing it, the noose it fits. I'm losing shit, a stupid myth. You choose to live or choose to dip. You choose to fight or lose your grip and lose a gift. Oh.
I feel like I'm losing my mind. Is everybody in the world blind? Please, Lord, give me a sign, a sign. I feel like I'm losing my mind. Is everybody in the world blind?
Alrighty, welcome back everyone. We just talked about some of the biggest lingering questions around the top 4 teams going into this year. We'll continue that throughout the week likely, but let's get into segment 2 here, and let's talk about Will Howard. He is likely one of the most important, maybe the most important player in the entire country as we head into this year. I've talked about this on here before. If he plays elite level football, Ohio State's your national champion. Just plain and simple, they are going to be a team that is going to be nearly impossible to beat. But the big time question here is, did they really upgrade? Or is he outright better than Kyle McCord? Or is this something where they feel like they upgraded, but they didn't quite? And that's something that a lot of people have been debating, and some people have very different opinions on. Some say they didn't upgrade at all, and frankly, most of those people are wearing maize and blue right now. Some say he's going to be incredible this year, and they're wearing scarlet and gray. I don't wear either, so let's get into it a little bit. I'll try to be as unbiased as I possibly can here, but you're coming into a year with a guy like Will Howard that frankly has a lot of good football behind him. There's no question about that. Has won a Big 12 title against a team that went on to play in the national title, so is definitely someone that can play elite football. The worry is he's not a better passer than Kyle McCord, pretty much by any metric. There's really nothing you can point to because Kyle McCord last year had a higher completion percentage, more yards per attempt, less INTs than Will Howard has had any given year throughout his entire career. They've also had the same number of touchdowns a year ago with 24 through the air. So it's not like you're upgrading passing-wise. It's not like you're going from Kyle McCord to C.J. Stroud. C.J. Stroud's not walking through that door and putting every ball exactly where you want it to go. Now, it doesn't mean Will Howard is not capable of making that throw, but when you talk about the struggles of Kyle McCord last year, they were relatively wildly overblown. Let's just be honest. There were a number of games where he played really good football. They were within 6 points and really like 30 yards of beating that Michigan team at the end of the year. So it wasn't like Kyle McCord was atrocious. There was a couple of things that just weren't where they needed to be for this offense to be what it can. And there were a number of different ways to kind of look at this. When you talked about the C.J. Stroud Ohio State team, they were pretty one-dimensional. You knew that the quarterback was not going to be a running threat. In fact, it looked like C.J. Stroud was outright scared of the line of scrimmage at times, but that's a side point. But on the flip side of that, every ball was exactly where it needed to be. He was making every single throw. There was never a misbeat. Everything was on time. So you didn't have to have that running threat because you always had to worry about the passing. In Kyle McCord's offense, they were both one-dimensional, but also weren't necessarily all that scary through the air. They didn't have the guy that was going to hit every single spot. So is Will Howard an upgrade? Is he a guy that is going to make this team outright better, or are we seeing a little bit of a repeat from last year? And frankly, I'll get to it towards the end of this, but maybe it doesn't even matter. But at the end of the day, I do think he is a little bit of an upgrade. I do think he is a upgrade from what Kyle McCord had, because you look at one stat very, very simply. Kyle McCord had a grand total of negative 65 rushing yards a year ago. Will Howard had over 300 in limited time. That's the difference. Plain and simple, that's the difference between these two guys. And frankly, it happens across the country where you have two guys that are roughly around the same level, where at least throwing the football, roughly around the same level. You pick the one that's a little bit more dynamic. You pick the one that can make plays with his legs, and you pick the one that might be able to get out of a hairy situation and make a play for your team. So I think that's the big time thing where you're looking at all of these different things as you head into this season for Ohio State. And there's so many different questions about how Will Howard's going to handle all of this. And that might be the biggest part of this, and something I'll get into here, right here, where Will Howard has a big-time question on his plate, where you're moving from Kansas State to Ohio State. They're both Power 5 conferences, or they're both elite programs in today's football. They're both, playoff contenders. They're not the same thing. I think we all understand that. They're two very, very different things, and he needs to step in there with a lot of confidence, because the reality is you're trying to win over an entire locker room before you go on a run that has to end in the national title. So there's definitely a lot of pressure on him to become that leader for this team, to become the guy that they look to and say, that is our guy. We are going to follow him to the ends of the earth. And that's what you have at Texas. That's what you have at Georgia. That's what you have at Oregon. And Ohio State, you kind of need it a little bit. Frankly, Oregon's actually a fun one to watch as well with Dylan Gabriel, but it sounds like he's coming along more than fine. And I think Will Howard will too. I think Will Howard's ability to run the ball, I think Will Howard's toughness is going to be a huge part of this. And if you're questioning his toughness, you're more than welcome to go watch the Big 12 title against TCU. He makes every play that you want him to do, and he'll stay on the field when you might not want him to. So he's a very, very tough guy, and definitely someone that, even though, he was passed on by Avery Johnson, it just means that guy is more special. It just means, Avery Johnson is a different animal when it comes to running the football. It doesn't mean Will Howard is bad quarterback by any means. And I think one of the bigger things there was actually Avery Johnson. They moved on to him for a number of different reasons. But I think a huge one was when you have a guy that is that dynamic with his feet and you have a conference in a lot of ways that does a lot of drop 8 coverage where they only rush 3 guys and they allow a lot of things to develop on the back end. Having someone that can just outright beat you for 20 yards down the field with his legs is a huge advantage. And while Will Howard could do that, you just take it to the next level with Avery Johnson. But getting back to Will Howard at Ohio State, this is the picture that I want to talk about the most. This is the moment that I want to talk about the most because it is the moment that every defensive end, every linebacker that they face is going to be very confused. And that was the big difference. We talked about it a little bit ago where Kyle McCord, when he was running the offense, it was pretty one-dimensional. You knew what you were seeing from one side of the ball. You knew that if there was a play action or if there was a, give to the running back, it was either going to be play action, he was going to back up to pass, or that running back was getting the ball and you were going to be able to meet him in the hole. That was the big difference. There wasn't this, huge problem with Ohio State's offense. It was really just little margins. But at the end of the day, using the moment where Will Howard has his hands on the ball, so does Quinshon Judkins. The defensive end is watching both of them. He has to make a decision. And the thing is, you can make a decision now, or the person that is, defending this has to make a decision now, not knowing what's going to happen, not knowing that, Kyle McCord, that he knew that Kyle McCord could not get out and run for 20 yards around him. He knew that he didn't have that athletic ability. Will Howard does, and that's the biggest difference here, where you don't have defensive ends or linebackers that are just crashing into the box. You don't have, a ton of people just saying, well, the ball is in the gut of TreVeyon Henderson, so the ball is going to TreVeyon Henderson. That is rarely going to happen this year because you got a guy right next to him that can burn you for 80 yards because he's done it in the past. So that's the thing about this, where it's no longer, you either have a pass from Kyle McCord and you know what's coming, or you have a run and you know what's coming. Now you could have what looks like a run turns into an RPO, or what looks like a run turns into a read option, and Will Howard is down the sideline before you even know it. And that's the biggest thing here, because Chip Kelly's offense, that's where the money is made. That's where he's been incredible throughout his career, and that's where at UCLA he was remarkably solid. Carson Steele and TJ Harden, too, very solid running backs, got over 800 yards a year ago. Colin Schlee was the only running back that was a real threat, and he didn't play too much, still finished with 425 yards and over 10 yards a carry. That's the reality of this offense. And frankly, Quinshon Judkins, TreVeyon Henderson, and Will Howard are all upgrades from those 3 guys that I just named. So that's the biggest difference here. You're going to be able to not only run the ball, not only pass the ball to the same extent, or maybe a little bit better than you were a year ago, maybe a little bit worse, but at the end of the day, what you're going to be able to do is keep people guessing. What you're going to be able to do is pull out that RPO and make sure that that linebacker dives on a run, or the defensive end, stays out on Will Howard, and you have TreVeyon Henderson 15 yards down the field before the defensive end can really react. So that's the biggest difference to me. It's not, these, grandiose things. Can he make the passes? Can he take that step forward? Is he going to be able to run for 100 yards a game? It's just this moment. It's just the uncertainty that this causes elevates this offense that little bit more than they did a year ago. So while Will Howard, doesn't necessarily jump off the page when he's passing the football, he's not someone that is going to be, lighting up the stat sheet by any means. I can promise you that. he doesn't need to at the same time. And he has some really, really good players around him to make it a little bit easier. And for Kyle McCord, I think a year ago, you look at that team compared to this team, the two biggest differences is the wide receiver room really isn't just one guy, and I understand they had plenty of guys in that room a year ago, but Marvin Harrison Jr. was 700 yards above the next top receiver, and it was a tight end in Cade Stover. That can't be the case this year, and frankly, it likely won't be. You'll have to keep track of so many other guys because the ball is going to be spread out a little bit more, and you have two running backs right next to you that are very easy to get the ball to and then just let them do what they do in open field. So I think as you look at this, there's so many things heading in his direction that he doesn't have to be perfect. He doesn't have to be this remarkable quarterback. And frankly, in a number of different ways, he doesn't even have to really be an upgrade from Kyle McCord. He has, in my opinion, he has a more myriad of weapons this upcoming year. I think he has a better O-line. I think he has the best defense in the country. And I think he has a running ability that fits Chip Kelly almost perfectly. So you look at this team and you look at all of the different variables that go into it. And Will Howard is maybe the biggest variable of the bunch. It's not that big of a variable because all of the other things that are going forward for this team, all the other things that are fully set in stone, like this defense, like the pass threats they have, like the running back that they're going to have, and like the run game that they expect to have, he doesn't have to be perfect. He can be, play B-plus football, and they could win a national title. So it's one of those things that maybe he's not that big of an upgrade over Kyle McCord, but maybe it doesn't matter. Maybe he doesn't need to be a huge upgrade, and they can still win way more games, and they can still win a national title. Now, the whole other question is, can he make the plays that need to be made down a stretch of a big-time game? The Big 12 title made me feel pretty confident in that, but it's always a question when you move up. So it's definitely going to be really fun to watch. He's obviously one of the most interesting players as we head into this season, but at the end of the day, he's going to have to answer the bell, and he's going to have to at least play more consistent football than Kyle McCord. I don't know if he has to be a huge upgrade because of all the incredible things all around this roster, but he's got to play consistent, and he's got to make sure those legs play a part in this offense because that's why he was brought in, plain and simple. So it'll be fun to watch that one. Definitely one of the most powerful players in this entire season this upcoming year. But let's get into let's take our second break here before we get into who's going to be the odd team out in the SEC. This is a big time question for me, and frankly, there's likely going to be more than one odd team out. But at the end of the day, there are a lot of teams with a lot of expectations, and there's only so much oxygen in the room. So we'll break it down right after this, so stick with us.
Looking for your daily fix of sports talk without having to pay for it? GSMC Sports Network is available on YouTube. Just search GSMC Sports Network. Get your fix of daily sports talk shows on YouTube, absolutely free. NFL, college football, NBA, MLB, MMA, UFC, fantasy football, and so much more. GSMC Sports Network has shows running all day long, with new sports shows starting every 2 hours. Just like on your favorite cable sports channel, except GSMC Sports Network is absolutely free. Just search GSMC Sports Network on YouTube to catch one of your new favorite shows, like the GSMC College Football Podcast, Chip Shot Football Podcast, Hoops and Heels Women's Sports Podcast, GSMC Basketball Podcast, and so many more. Check it out for yourself. GSMC Sports Network, now available on YouTube absolutely free. Search GSMC Sports Network on YouTube right now.
Alrighty, welcome back, everyone. We just talked about Will Howard. Can he answer the bell? Can he be the quarterback that Ohio State needs him to be? And if he's going to be that, how many rushing yards does he have to have? Because that is definitely going to be a huge part of the equation. But let's get into who is going to be the odd team out in the SEC. This has kind of been the underlying question in the SEC. We've had so many different questions as we head in. Can Texas and OU jump in and immediately start winning? Is Georgia still the class of the SEC? Can Bama be the team that they have been in the past without Nick Saban? There's so many different things to kind of wager as we head into this year, but the top thing that I've noticed across pretty much every fan base as you've gone through Twitter and all of the different social apps, they all expect a lot. Pretty much every single team in this conference expects a lot this upcoming year, but the teams that I'll really dig in on are Georgia, Texas, Bama, Ole Miss, LSU, Missouri, and Tennessee. Frankly, I think all of those teams are looking at this year and finding 10 wins on that schedule, plain and simple. So that can't happen. They just cannot happen. There's no mathematical world where that unfolds. So who's going to be the odd man out? Who's going to be the team that leaves this year just a little bit upset, whether that's an 8-4 record or even a 9-3 record, but didn't necessarily win the games that you needed to win to get into the playoffs? So obviously that's the end goal. Everyone wants to be in the dance. Everyone wants to be in the playoff, and you're going to have to compete with quite a few teams to get there. So it'll be really interesting to watch this, but let's get into the top two teams first, and we'll start with Georgia because Georgia hasn't lost a regular season game in 39 games. They do face a tougher schedule this year, no doubt about it, but frankly, I think there's almost no chance that they go from winning 39 straight to losing 4 or even 3 of 12. I understand those 3 road games that they have to play are going to be really tough. You'd be hard-pressed to tell me that they're going to lose all 3 of those games. But this is one of those teams that, frankly, they're above doubt at this point. If they come out this year and they're really flat and they go in the wrong direction, then we're having a very different conversation at the end of the year, obviously. But as of right now, Georgia is the best program in the country, and I'm never going to predict that they lose 4 games or even 3 games in a season as of right now. As for Texas, this one's a little bit more variable, right? This is the team that is walking into a conference that is going to be a little bit tough. What's going on, Jay? How you doing? This is a team that you have questions. Is D-line going to be a problem? Is running back going to be a problem? Can they handle the physicality? All of those stuff are definitely going to come into play. There's no doubt about that. But Texas does have a very nice schedule. In the grand scheme of the SEC, where there's not really a nice schedule among them, but if there was, Texas would be probably the prime example. So I tend to believe that this is more of a schedule type pick. I think 9-3 is roughly where they're going to end if things go wrong. I think if things go really right, obviously they can go 12-0, but as of right now, I don't see a bottoming out feature for Texas this year. Now, there is still that possibility, but I think a lot of things would have to go wrong, including a number of injuries for that to happen. Moving on to Bama, this is a team that has a wide range of possibilities this year. There are a number of people that are very much cheering for this to be a 7-5 team and be able to look at the end of the year and say it was all Saban. It was all Saban keeping everything rolling over there, but they're also a team that can walk into Atlanta and take home a second consecutive SEC title. So they can do a number of different things this upcoming year. I think they are a team that has a little bit more variability. I do see an 8-4 record in this year for Bama in some variation. Now, it's going to take quite some time. There's no two ways about that. I don't think this is going to be a big-time bad team by any means, but there's always that reality. A lot is changing over there. Nick Saban walking out the door and so many different things changing. There's a reality where a lot of things go wrong and they end up 8-4 and leave this season really wondering what the future of that program looks like. As for Ole Miss, I think you look at this team and the question more than anything else is can they not have big time injuries that get in the way because the depth is not necessarily where you want to be, and do they have the comfortability on defense to play an elite level football every single week? And frankly, I think that has a little bit more to do with Pete Golding than the actual personnel, because don't necessarily love Pete Golding, but that's a conversation for another day. I do think this is a team that has every single ability to win a national title. There's nothing this team can't do this upcoming year, but at the end of the day, when you're replacing that much on a defense that wasn't necessarily great last year, but obviously you upgraded at a number of positions, there's still the question of putting it all together and figuring it all out. So they have a little bit of bust potential. I don't necessarily think they're going to be the team that is at least entirely left out. Maybe they don't make the playoff, and that would be a disappointment, but at the end of the year, I don't think they're going to be a team that's 8-4, 7-5, and looking at this year as a what happened type year. Moving on to LSU, you look at this team, and this is probably the easiest argument to make of the bunch because the defense is not going to be great, plain and simple. You can't go from what they were last year to a great defense in 1 year just because of some staff changes. I do love the staff changes, and I do think they're going to be a very, very good team this upcoming year, but when you look at this team, there's always a reality where the defense doesn't move forward very much, and without Jaden Daniels, without Malik Neighbors, without Brian Thomas, you don't have the guys on the outside or at quarterback to make the plays you need to. So this would be the team that, frankly, you could probably make the easiest argument with, and we'll see if that's the team that I end up picking. But Missouri is a team that I think is really interesting, and I think they have a number of different things that there's not a ton of stuff that looks really off. Now, the defense I have some worries about because I think they transferred in a lot of really good players, but when you're losing guys like Chris Abrams-Drain and Enos Rakestraw, those guys can't really be replaced. Now, you can play good football behind them, but when you have that amount of ability and that amount of talent coming out of that area, it's going to be really hard to pull this off. But overall, I think they're a team that absolutely can make some things happen, but I do have some worries on that defensive side of the ball. Tennessee is another team here, and the question is really, is Nico Iamaleava going to be able to hit the notes right away? Is he going to be able to be a guy that walks in his first full season running this offense and be full go? And that's a question that I have. I do think he's a remarkably talented kid, and if it's not this year, 2025 will be darn right remarkable from him. But at the end of the day, I do think this is a very good player and definitely someone that can hit those notes. But on the flip side, it is his first full year starting, and that always can go a little bit sideways. And then the back-end defense is definitely a little bit of a worry for me as well. So there are questions around all of these teams. And then you got a number of different ones on the back end where Texas A&M, OU, maybe even Kentucky are sitting there. In fact, I saw a video of Kentucky fans finding a path to the playoffs. So everyone's thinking this way. That's the way that this works. But if I'm picking a team, if I'm picking one out of the hat and saying this is going to be the one that's left out, frankly, it's going to be more than one. So you could include LSU in this. You could include Texas A&M and OU and a couple other teams in this. But at the end of the day, the team that I think is going to have the biggest trouble is Missouri. And it's the weirdest thing in the world because the schedule is not very hard. The schedule is not one that you look at and it's an absolute murderer's row of SEC schedules. So it's not a problem of the schedule. It's not even a problem of a lot of the personnel, at least. The defensive side I have my big-time worries about, but I just don't think this team is going to take that big-time step forward from last year. I think last year they did a number of incredible things, but also last year they had a number of games that came down to a bounce of a ball, someone not picking off a pass from Brady Cook that was off target, or Chris Abrams-Drain or Enos Rakestraw making an incredible play on the back end of that defense to shut down a drive. So overall, I think I look at this not as a kind of indictment of this team or making this team out to be any worse than they're going to be in the future, because I still think they're building something really incredible over there. But at the end of the day, you usually find that when you have luck one direction one year, it kind of comes back to bite you the other year. And frankly, this is another thing that could apply to a team like Texas that had a number of one-score games and ended up coming out on the right side of them. But if a ball bounces the other way in a number of those games, they're coming on the wrong side, and they're looked at a lot differently going into this year. So, and actually we'll get into that tomorrow, I believe. But overall, I think I look at Missouri and I think they had a lot of magic last year, and I think some of that magic is going to run out. Now, the easiest argument is comfortably LSU. I can make that argument in my sleep. I'm just buying into LSU a little bit more than some other people. Tennessee, I could argue that Nico won't be ready for the moment and won't be able to walk into Sanford Stadium and be able to put up the numbers that he needs to. So there's a number of different arguments across pretty much every team on this list, all the way up to Bama. But at the end of the day, I think Missouri is going to be the team that walks out and just says, we had more on the table this year. We had more that we could have done with Luther Burden, with all of the wide receivers they have, with Brady Cook in his third year starting. There were so many things in place that I think even a 9-3 season where you miss the playoff is going to be like, man, we had an opening to make something happen. If one play goes our way throughout that last little bit, we're in the playoff. So it's not necessarily going to be a overwhelming, disappointing season like a 7-5 or anything, but I'm a little bit worried about Missouri. And Jay, who will win? I have Georgia winning this conference. I do have Georgia and Texas facing off in the championship. I know it's a little bit of a chalk answer, but overall, I think those two teams are just a little bit different than everyone else and a little bit deeper and have the ability to sustain some of the injuries that some other teams like Ole Miss, Bama, and Missouri, maybe even Tennessee, just can't quite sustain as well. So I am picking those two teams to meet and Georgia to take home the trophy, but frankly, any of the teams I just named could do it. So it's going to be a crazy year in the SEC, but at the end of the day, someone's going to be disappointed, and it'll be really interesting to see who that team or who those teams are at the end of the year. But let's take our third break here. When we come back, we're going to break down some fall camp intel. There's so much going on around the country. There's a very interesting news out of Boise State. There's an injury at Louisville. There's some injuries at Oregon that I need to get you updated on. So we'll break it all down right after this, so stick with us.
For the best and latest podcasts available anywhere, Go to the podcast app on your cell phone and type in GSMC to access free content-rich podcasts on health and wellness, book reviews, sports, entertainment, relationships, social media, movies, technology, finance, and even weird news. Subscribe and download the GSMC Podcast Network's family of shows, available everywhere podcasts are found.
Alrighty, welcome back everyone. We just talked about all of the crazy things going on in the SEC and how there's not enough oxygen in the room. There's not enough wins to go around for everyone to be happy, so there's going to be some disappointed teams, and pinpointing that is not easy by any means. But I'll pick Missouri for the time being, but it could definitely change very quickly. Let's get into fall camp intel. There is so much going on all around the country, and injuries continue to roll in as they do every single year around this time, and you always hate to see it. And then this one is particularly huge for this team. Louisville lost their wide receiver Colin Lacey for an extended period of time. I've seen 6 to 8 weeks has been kind of a moniker I've seen a number of different places. He broke his collarbone in practice, so obviously a huge blow for the Cardinals. This is one where they brought in this guy to be their wide receiver one, plain and simple. He came in from South Alabama, I believe had 1,000 yards receiving a year ago. He was a guy that was going to be one of the most prolific playmakers they have on their offense, and losing him is a huge deal because having someone, especially Tyler Shuck at quarterback, having a guy that you can just find his number, throw the ball in his direction, and feel confident that he's going to come up with a catch, that was this guy, and that kind of does handcuff them just a little bit on offense, and it'll be interesting to see how they kind of develop throughout the season, and once he does come back, how different it does look, and if it matters, if it looks different at the end of the day, because maybe things go so poorly early on that when he comes back, it's just a team that's kind of just playing out the rest of the schedule. But obviously, it's still a very talented team beyond him, but this is a huge loss for that team. I want to go up to Boise State here for a second because something happened yesterday that I did not expect. Boise State has picked Maddox Madsen to be their starting quarterback for this upcoming year. He beat out Malachi Nelson, the 5-star in the 2023 class. He went to USC, then transferred to Boise State this offseason, and pretty much everyone thought he was going to be the starter, including me. I thought he was definitely going to be the starter out there, but it sounds like Maddox Madsen has done really the unthinkable and has won that job. He was actually someone that got injured last year and had to get surgery on his back and found his way back and played really, really good football. So huge shout out to him. This is a remarkable thing and definitely something that Boise State is the same exact team that they were a second ago. I think a lot of people put them on a little bit of a pedestal because of Malachi Nelson. If this guy beats him out, he's right there with him, right? So definitely will be a really fun thing to watch. As for Malachi Nelson, this is not exactly what the way he saw his career going. I can promise you that. Definitely a really talented player that seemed to be off to an okay start at USC. Things kind of fell flat pretty quickly, and it's been a weird couple of months, that's for sure for him. But at the end of the day, he'll hopefully get his moment at some point, hopefully whether it's at Boise State or somewhere else, and he'll be able to play some good football. But a very, very weird situation at the very least for a number one overall recruit to be at this position right now. But moving forward to Texas, as you can imagine, all of the running backs were in non-contact jerseys for the scrimmage in Austin this weekend, just trying to make sure they get to week one with 3 running backs. That is the ultimate goal, and if they can do that, that is a huge time win. Another injury to watch is Jake Majors. Apparently he sat out all week with a high ankle sprain. Doesn't sound like it's going to be anything that remotely keeps him out of the opener, but definitely something to watch. This is a guy that, frankly, if you take him out of this offensive line, a lot of things change, and things get a little bit sketchy at times, especially on the interior. So a huge player that if he's not back for week one, especially if he's not back for Michigan, you got some problems. It doesn't sound like that's going to be the issue, but definitely is something to watch as we head into this year. Moving on to what happened in the scrimmage, the quarterbacks seemed to be really strong this last cycle. It seems like they took a step forward from last scrimmage where things were just a little bit disconnected on that side of the ball. The guy that you keep hearing about is Juan Davis, though. The tight end that is very, very talented, probably the most athletically inclined tight end they have, although Amari Niblack is not far behind him by any means. So this is a guy that they're going to get on the field one way or the other, whether it's him lining up in the backfield. He played a little quarterback in high school, so Maybe he fits in there in a Wildcat type situation. Who knows? But at the end of the day, this is definitely someone that will get some reps and just expands the number of weapons that they have. On defense, Vernon Broughton is the story, and that is something that Texas fans really needed to hear because you're losing T'Vondre Sweat, you're losing Byron Murphy, and having someone like Vernon Broughton come on the way that he has is absolutely huge. He is going to be a monster and definitely someone that they very much need to hit this upcoming year. Jelani McDonald is another name to watch at safety. He has been really, really good throughout fall camp and might just be one of the best pure athletes across this entire team. So definitely a guy to watch there. Over at Ohio State, Will Howard is the official starter. We just talked about that, but the quarterback controversy is not over. Julian Sayin and Devin Brown are still fighting over that quarterback 2 position. Definitely think it's going to be Brown just because of the experience, but at the end of the day, Julian Sayin can do some stuff with the football that is downright magical. So it'll be really interesting. I'm very sorry about that. It'll be really interesting to see how this develops throughout the year. Maybe it's Devin Brown to start the year as the backup, but throughout time is Julian Sayin, and I expect Julian Sayin to be the starter going into next year. But moving on, we've heard about a number of wide receivers because they got a number of wide receivers up at Ohio State, but it sounds like Brennan Ennis is someone who just continues to pop up and definitely someone to watch, but also Jeremiah Smith. He continues to make the plays that you want him to make as a freshman, and the dude is just remarkable. I cannot wait to watch this guy. Probably one of the top 10 guys I cannot wait to watch because he's going to do some special stuff this year. I can promise you that. Also, another guy to watch for is James Peebles, a very talented running back that they brought in as a freshman, and definitely will have his say in a couple of rushes here and there, especially if an injury pops up. He seems to be ready to roll. And then Sonny Styles is someone I want to talk about on defense. He made his way down from the safety position into the linebacker position, and apparently he looks really, really strong. There's going to be a big-time question of there's certain things a linebacker is going to have to do that a running back didn't necessarily have to do, but he's going to be a very dynamic playmaker for them and definitely someone that can do a lot of things that they really need to be done in that linebacker core. And then Kenyatta Jackson is someone to watch on that defensive line, a younger player, but definitely could be a depth piece this upcoming year. Over to Georgia, the quarterback 2 controversy doesn't seem to be much of a controversy. Gunnar Stockton is fully taking over, and Jaden Rashada is not. Apparently, he did not look very great on Saturday, and Gunnar Stockton looked really good. And one of the guys he threw a touchdown pass to was Nitro Tuggle, which is a guy that you hear about pretty much every single fall report, it feels like, out of UGA, where this guy is very, very fast, electric. He's someone that if you need, a trick up your sleeve, if you need someone that you can pull out in the fourth quarter that no one's expecting, it might just be this guy. He is so dynamic, and with all the wide receivers on that team, he might just be one that is hard to keep off the field. So very, very fun to watch him develop. Carson Beck, Tate Ratledge, and a number of other guys were kept out of this one. It's just the way UGA goes about business at this point. They don't need to play the starters because they know who their starters are. But at the end of the day, we also have some D linemen that are showing out. Joseph Jonah Ajayi is definitely someone that definitely needs some love. He is making every single play, and he's someone that on that interior, you're going to need a little bit of help. This might just be where it comes from. So a huge, huge thing there. And then finally, Johnny Aguero is someone to watch. He was kind of in a little bit of a battle with Ja'Cory Thompson throughout the camp and throughout early parts of fall camp, but it sounds like he's taking control, and that's something they very much needed. I talked about this a little bit, maybe a week ago or so, where I said this is the most important position in that back end for Georgia, and they need someone to go in there, feel very confident in. So it seems like that's going to be the guy, and it seems like they're plenty confident in him as of right now. Going over to Oregon, they have some injury troubles that are not big deals right now, but very well could be big deals down the road. So the big time one is the Indiana transfer Matthew Bedford. He was likely to start at the left guard position, was a very, very talented player at Indiana, and really was just a dominating force for the majority of the time he was there. It sounds like he has suffered from a little bit of an injury, and he's going to be out for a little bit. It doesn't sound like there is a good idea of what the timeline is, but it sounds like somewhere in the early part of September is where you're going to see him again. So missing probably the first 4 games, which are Idaho, Boise State, at Oregon State, and I'm blanking on the last one. I apologize for that. But they play 4 games that are relatively manageable. They do play Michigan State to open the month of September, October. I apologize. So that's definitely something to watch. But then you have the one against Ohio State. So if that's his first game back, and the first game back he's looking across and he's seeing Talik Williams and he's seeing Ty Hamilton, that might be a little bit of a problem. Right now, it's going to be Nishad Strother at that position, but overall, this is one that you desperately need back as quickly as possible, especially before that Ohio State game on October 12th. But moving on, Jaleel Florence is another guy to watch. He has been sidelined for quite some time. He has had an injury that has really bothered him really since last year and has not gotten back up to full speed. And kind of a guy they really need to, if I'm being totally honest. He likely will not be ready for week 1, but definitely someone they're going to need throughout the season because him, Dante Manning, Aaron Flowers, these are the guys that are going to be huge in the depth pieces for that back end. So a huge player that definitely is going to need to be on the field once they get into the meat of that schedule that, as of right now, is not on the field, and there's not a good timeline for him as of right now. So moving on to Notre Dame, it sounds like the captains were decided for this year, and it's roughly the group that you would expect. It is Jack Kaiser, a very talented linebacker. You have Riley Leonard, the transfer quarterback. Riley Mills, the defensive tackle, very talented. Junior cornerback Benjamin Morrison, and then Xavier Watts. So roughly the group that you would expect. Howard Cross not getting it is a little bit frustrating if you were to ask me, but at the end of the day, the biggest takeaway is Riley Leonard being the captain is a huge deal. Him being able to walk into this locker room and gain the trust of his teammates and gain the trust of his coaches to the degree that they let him have that C on his chest is a really big deal. Same thing happened with Sam Hartman a year ago, and it definitely sets you up for more success as you head into the season. So very much like this group, it's a group that is really, really talented, and it shows you the depth and talent they have, especially at big-time positions for Notre Dame. So definitely huge decisions there, but on the offensive line, they still have big-time questions. I have no earthly idea what the 5 is going to be, how they're going to run out, because the movement, especially at the tackle positions, have been all over the place. Anthony Knapp, the freshman, has been the guy at left tackle. At right tackle, it's been all over the place. Emil Wagner has taken some snaps. Sam Pendleton, a sophomore, has taken some snaps. Regardless, this needs to be figured out. This is not something that you can walk into week 1 and say, yeah, these are the 2 best guys. Not the 2 guys that we feel totally confident in, but these are the 2 best of the group that we have. That is not a scenario where you're going to win, especially against guys like Nick Scourton and Cassius Howell. So overall, I think this is the biggest worry that I have for Notre Dame as we head into this season, where you don't figure out those tackle positions, it doesn't matter how incredible you've improved on the outside and that quarterback, because he's going to be on the ground before anything happens. So definitely something to watch as we get a little bit closer. Moving over to Clemson, it's pretty much all good news. It sounds like Cade Klubnik is much more comfortable in this offense, and that's all you need to hear if you're a Clemson fan. You don't need to hear that he's tearing people apart or doing anything incredible. You just have to hear that this offense makes more sense to him, because last year it looked like it didn't that much at times. So definitely one to watch, a very, very talented player, and overall, it sounds like that unit is coming along the way they want to. The bad news out of Clemson is Shelton Lewis. It sounds like he is day-to-day and should play in week 1, so not too bad of news, but definitely something to watch, as that back end is not the deepest group by any means on this team. They're definitely going to need someone like Shelton Lewis to at least take a rep here and there. So definitely someone to watch as we get into this season. And then finally, LSU, the team that apparently has 11-on-11 tape from their practices rolling around on YouTube for some reason, which is beyond crazy to me and definitely not the way that it should be going, but that's beside the point. Definitely something that we can unpack a little bit later. But I do want to talk about the back end, because that is the biggest question as we head into this season. It sounds like they feel at least solid, and that is, I'm saying that very, very questionably, obviously, because of what happened last year, but it sounds like Javian Toviano has taken another step forward. It sounds like P.J. Woodland has come in as a freshman and has played really good football. Ashton Stamps is continuously playing really good football at the cornerback position, so it feels like they have the guys. It feels like they have enough players to make this happen. Now, it felt like that a year ago, so you never really know what's going to happen, but as of right now, there are a lot of good reports coming out of fall camp for sure. DJ Chester, their center, was out for practice on Friday. Doesn't sound like it's too serious because there haven't been too many reports, at least over the last couple of days, about it. Garrett Dellinger would move over to center, and Tyree Adams would be the left guard in this scenario. So something to watch as we get into the season, especially against USC. If DJ Chester isn't ready to go, then that will be the lineup and could make the difference at the end of the day. And then Caleb Jackson just continues to make waves. Frankly, I think he's going to be end up being the starter at some point this year. Maybe not week 1 with Josh Williams being the more, consistent, more veteran presence. But I think Caleb Jackson is special and definitely will be the guy that at the end of the year is the starter for this team. Overall, I think you look at all of the stuff going on around fall camp, there's a million different things to update you on. And we'll do exactly what we did last week and likely do it every single day this week. Fall camp is starting to kind of wrap up. Usually by the end of this week, teams have kind of gone into their normal week schedule. So it's technically fall camp, but it's really kind of just a game week. So definitely will be really interesting to watch over this next week as things start to wrap up and some things are set in stone for this upcoming year. But let's take our last break here, and we're going to do a little bit of a recruiting update. There are so many different commitments that happened over the weekend that I need to update you on, and Tennessee took home the big-time prize this weekend. But we'll break it down right after this, so stick with us. Alrighty, welcome back everyone. We just did a little bit of a fall camp update, some injuries happening all around the country, and some different things that definitely will keep you updated on throughout this week as we head into the very first week of college football. But let's get into a little bit of a recruiting update, and Tennessee has been on an absolute tear, and we will get to them throughout this segment, but I want to start up in Iowa, and they got a huge commitment from Iowasi Epinesa. Definitely a very talented edge rusher, someone that is going to be an absolute beast because I saw his brother be an absolute beast in those same exact colors. So he is the brother of AJ, the guy that is, I believe, currently with the Bills. Could have moved around, but I think he's with the Bills right now. He's ranked the number 3 defensive lineman in the 2025 class. This kid is remarkable, and he's definitely someone that Iowa very much wanted, and they were trailing for quite some time behind Penn State and Utah. They were able to pull it out, and I'm sure AJ is very pumped for this decision. So another Epinesa brother finding his way to Iowa, and we'll see if he can tear it up the same way AJ did. Moving on, we got Ben Hanks Jr., and he is committed to Florida. We talked about him last week, and there was very little world where he wasn't a Florida Gator, and now he is. He is the son of the former All-SEC linebacker Ben Hanks Jr., or Ben Hanks Sr., obviously not Jr., but first of all, if he's anything like his dad, Florida fans are going to love this kid, plain and simple. But this is a very athletic, long cornerback that is going to be pretty much an immediate contributor for this team. I think they do have some good players on that back end, but they're still building it out. They're still making sure that they have the top-level athletes that they're capable of having there, and I think this guy, at the very least, will be a rotational piece in 2025 for them. Moving on, 4-star running back Shakai Mills-Knight has committed to Ole Miss. this guy is a bruiser. He is 6'2", 220, and this is kind of the running back that I was waiting for Lane Kiffin to get. He loves those speedster guys. He loves the Ulysses Bentleys of the world, and I totally understand that. Frankly, I love those guys too. But at the end of the day, having that guy that can run in between the tackles is a huge deal, and this is exactly going to be that guy. A huge player, and a lot of running backs might just find their way out of the program with some transfer portal stuff that could be happening with all of the running backs they have there, and a couple of guys moving on to the next level. This could be definitely a supplementary piece in 2025 for sure, and might just inform another decision that we'll talk about a little bit later. Moving on to LSU, they picked up a pair of big-time commitments, and it started with Mike Tyler, the very talented tight end that is 6'4", 230. He is exactly what you want of the tight end. He was, they got him over Duke and West Virginia, so might just be a little bit of a evaluation type piece where maybe he's not as highly rated as LSU thinks he should be. So definitely something to watch there. But overall, they love big bodies over at LSU. They love, especially at tight end, when you have a guy like Tyler coming in and then you have Kamarian Pimpton already on the team. It could be a scary duo, that is for sure, no doubt about that. But moving on to the other one they were able to flip Cade Phillips from Texas to LSU. This is a very talented cornerback, might play safety at the next level, but definitely something to watch there. A top 65 recruit, number 7 cornerback in the country, exactly what LSU needed right now. And frankly, on the other side, Texas is really struggling to recruit elite cornerbacks. They very much need them at this point in time, and right now, Terry Joseph, who is the cornerback coach over there, is going in this year a little bit on the hot seat, but definitely something to watch. They only have one corner in this class right now, and it's Caleb Chester. So definitely something to watch for that team, and they need to get something going, especially at that position. 4-star Bryce Fitzgerald has committed to Miami, a very talented safety, very long. It's someone that can absolutely help in coverage over the back end, and someone they very much needed. And they've done a really good job rebuilding this secondary, this class, where you have guys like Hilton Stubbs, Jabari Antoine, and Fitzgerald. They're 3 of the top 4 guys in this class, and this is a very good class. So absolutely has been a priority for them, and definitely needs to be as they head into this season. They got another commitment, though, from Micah Newton. He actually flipped from NC State, so a huge commitment there. Definitely one that they wanted to get in the fold. 6'2", 263, definitely someone that absolutely has shined a number of different places. Was on varsity for 3 years, 27 career tackles, 47 tackles for loss. Definitely will likely be an interior guy at the next level, but is a huge piece. Likely a little bit more developmental, but definitely a very, very good player that could become an absolute beast for Miami. Jaden Harmon is another one I want to talk about. Another flip in this last weekend from Alabama to Tennessee. This is a 6'1", 215 linebacker. Very, very talented guy. Someone that he's been committed to Alabama for quite some time, since April. So definitely a big-time pickup for Tennessee. And they continue to put together a really good defensive class over there and continue to do just really special things overall on the recruiting trail if you're Tennessee. And it didn't stop there. This was the big-time commitment of the weekend. David Sanders Jr. committed to Tennessee, a 5-star offensive tackle, the number 1 offensive tackle in the country, 6'6", 290 offensive tackle out of Charlotte, North Carolina. This was a very weird recruitment. It started where it was all Clemson. Everyone felt like that was pretty confident. Then all the energy moved over to Georgia, and it felt like Georgia was going to be the one that took him home. They were going to be the one that had him on the roster. Then there was a little bit of Nebraska buzz. Ohio State got to get on the mix, and then Tennessee finally was able to lock him up. So definitely a huge pickup for them, and definitely a guy that, frankly, they're likely going to have to do some shuffling on that offensive line after this year. If in the future they have a tackle duo of him and Zalance Hurd, it's going to be a mean duo, I can tell you that with absolute confidence. So definitely something to watch there. But moving on to some scheduled commitments and some intel on those as we get into the next little bit. Akeelan Deer is someone I want to talk about and relates to that running back commit for Ole Miss, that we talked about a little bit earlier. This is the number 2 running back in the class, a very, very talented kid. He decommitted from Ole Miss, and it looks like it's going to be all Alabama in this one. He's making his decision tomorrow, so definitely be on the lookout for that. Mississippi State is also in the top 3, but right now it looks like it's Bama. Maybe a distant second is Ole Miss, and then Mississippi State right there. But overall, this is likely going to be Bama. I'd be honestly surprised if it was anyone else, frankly. Andrew Marsh is also another one to watch. He is coming up tomorrow as well, so definitely one to keep an eye out on. It looks like It looks like it is going to be Michigan. It looks like that is going to be the team that ends up getting his services. And I've talked about this a lot on the show, but they need speedsters. And this is a guy that can really go. So definitely will open up that offense quite a bit, and definitely something that they very much need in that offense. So it would be a huge commitment there. And then let's get into pretty much just talking about Texas here for a second. Nick Brooks is a 4-star offensive tackle out of Cedar Rapids, Iowa. Very talented guy, someone that, along with Michael Fasusi coming up at the end of the month, are the big-time commitments here, or Michael Fasusi's coming up very soon, on Wednesday, actually, are the big-time commitments here. But he's down to 3 teams, Georgia, Texas, and USC. It sounds like it's going to be Texas. It was a Texas UGA battle for quite some time. USC kind of came into the mix a little bit later on in the process, but I do think it's going to be Texas. Has gotten a number of predictions there, and I'd lean that direction as we get a little bit closer to his date of committing. And then Aiden Anding is someone I want you to watch, because right now he's set to commit on August 24th. He's a very talented, lengthy corner that they likely need to build up a little bit from the 170 that he's at right now, but still has plenty of area for improvement. He's between Arkansas, LSU, and Texas. It sounds like LSU might have the inside track here, but with the commitment from Cade Phillips to play possibly corner, maybe safety there, I think it could be that Texas might win out on this one. I think Texas is definitely going to be pushing a lot of energy into this one, and I think when you look at their state of their cornerback committing right now, they need it really, really badly. So if they don't get it, you might have a problem. If LSU gets it, they're putting together a ridiculous secondary class. But at the end of the day, this is one Texas very much needs, and if they can't get it, then it's going to be an interesting conversation around Terry Joseph as we head into this season. But Michael Fasusi is someone to watch as well, another top offensive tackle commit, and he's committing on Wednesday, as we talked about. This one is Oklahoma's to lose at this point. There was a while where it looked like a 3-horse race and everyone was just jockeying for position. Oklahoma's kind of pulled away. I think they're going to be the team that gets his services, and as of right now, I think if Texas gets Nick Brooks, if A&M, I think they have a number of other feelers out there, but they all wanted this guy bad. I can promise you that. So Oklahoma's getting a huge player, and one that, frankly, I'd be shocked if he was not a first-year starter with all of the offensive line troubles they have up there. So definitely something to watch, a very talented player, and one that Oklahoma, if they can pull him in, then it would be absolutely huge. Another one that has become a Texas OU A&M battle is Jonah Williams, and this is one definitely to watch down the stretch, one that I think could get a little bit closer. Oregon's also in on this one, definitely a team to watch here, but as of right now, the Longhorns are getting more and more buzz as we get closer to this thing. More and more crystal balls and predictions are coming in for Texas to get Jonah Williams, and frankly, I think baseball has a huge part to play in this. This is a very talented baseball player, and Texas just hired a coach that just played in the national title, so that definitely does help you a little bit. I do think Texas might just win this one out, and that would be a huge help to a back-end class that does not look very great for the Longhorns. So that'll be an interesting one to watch, and frankly, overall, I think Texas is the team to watch this entire month. Throughout the rest of this month, whether it's Nick Brooks or Jonah Williams or Jamie French, we didn't even talk about, but seems like he's leaning even more in that direction. So they could have 3 5-stars commit this month in Jonah Williams, Jamie French, and already committed Khalil Lockett. They could add Nick Brooks to the conversation. So this is a group that, didn't necessarily have the start to the month that they wanted, with losing Cade Phillips and losing some of the players that they have throughout the last little bit, but they can still have a remarkable month and set them off on just a remarkable class this upcoming year. So definitely something to watch. I think this is going to be a very, very incredible month where a lot of movement is going to happen. You're going to figure out which teams are really going to cement themselves at the very top of the list and which teams might fade a little bit throughout the year. But at the end of the day, we all know that none of this really matters until pen's to paper. None of this really matters until we really get that guy on record saying, I'm going to this school, and it is in writing. But at the end of the day, definitely some big time things happening around recruiting, and we'll keep you updated. Probably a little bit less as football comes around, obviously, but definitely some big time recruitments that we will definitely let you know what happens with those as they happen. But That'll do it for this edition of the GSMC College Football Podcast, brought to you by the GSMC Sports Network. Your support means a lot to us, so please remember to subscribe to the show, leave a positive review. It does make a huge difference. Also, follow us on Facebook, Twitter, TikTok, Instagram, all of the social pages for all of the content and updates you could possibly want. We have really incredible people doing really awesome work across every single sport you could want. So anything you need in the world of sports, we totally have you covered over here at GSMC. But thank you once again for listening, and I will see you guys tomorrow.